right. Lazar, thank you so much for agreeing to take part in this interview. So we talked a little bit before, and I know that you've been diagnosed with schizoid personality disorder, and you've been facing some challenges in your life. You've also overcame some of these challenges. So why don't we start by maybe you telling me a little bit, what was it like to get that diagnosis? What was it like, maybe before the diagnosis and afterwards? Like, is there anything that changed for you?
Sure. So, I mean, in terms of diagnosis, I don't know if it was precisely per se, you could say that. It was more along the lines of for many years, I was in therapy for 3 years. And towards the end of it, I kind of brought up the subject and she confirmed, yes, you are on the schizoid spectrum. Right. And so and then I kind of went like, do I need to get a formal diagnosis? Is there like a test that I need to take and things like that? And I was kind of dissuaded from that conversation. So it was more along the lines of, here, all you need to do is up your typologies. Nothing good can come of it if you were actually to get that diagnosis. I don't know what's in the systems and things like that. I don't know reasons why. But in terms of, it all matched out in terms of my childhood, the way I look at things. And even more, it kind of confirmed that, okay, I'm on the spectrum, was the experiences of other people that I talked to or typed with on things like Reddit, YouTube, etc. And like, okay, for example, even the things that not necessarily were like in the diagnostics of like, oh, avoids, relationships, things like that. It was more along the lines of things like, for example, I was at a cafe once, and there was a like very an album playing in the background that meant a lot to me and was very profound in terms of feeling. And I felt extremely like a lot of anxiety within me because there's like this, music playing in the background that's like really powerful and like kind of like depressing and profound. And like everyone else is kind of walking around doing their own things. I'm the only one who's like, this is really bothering me. I'm like, okay, this is one scenario. I'm like, this is something, obviously I'm the only person in this entire cafe. There's a lot of people there who are being affected by this. And so I said, okay, I can go on the internet and say, does anyone else, feel like this way? And then like, yes, are people who are on the schizoid spectrum, you know exactly what I meant. And so anytime I'm in this point where I feel like there's no one else who's really hitting, like I'm not the only person here who's feeling this way, chances are it's going to be on that schizoid typology. But there are some things that don't really hit me as hard. Again, we talk to people who are higher functioning or lower functioning. Things like being deathly afraid of conversations, not having anything to say. Those aren't really things I struggle with at this point in my life. It's more along the internal world. Some of the relational hiccups, anhedonia, things like that. Those were the things, I guess, that were more on the overt side that I noticed kind of came up in my life.
So the major thing that it seems to be standing out to you is that your internal experience seems to be very different to people around you.
Yes, absolutely. And that can lead to me kind of like, is everybody else seeing this, or is it? But also, as I came to learn about it, because like even the things that I was doing in therapy were atypical for someone who is in therapy, right? Like I was never like, okay, here we go, like you're gonna help me fix me. We're gonna have a build a relationship and talk and things like that. It was more like I have these problems. I need to fix these problems. I'm going to do everything I can possibly do throughout this, and you're going to check my work. That was kind of my mentality about it. And then that actually caused some irritation here and there because I was like, what I was doing was I was getting kind of paranoid on people around me. I'm like diagnosing people. Like, okay, this person is probably borderline, or this person might be a narcissist, things like along those lines, or this person even like like yada yada. And this is all in hindsight. This was doing it to protect myself because my lack of boundaries. I was using my intellectual abilities to kind of like paint a picture, so I could be protected and safe and feel safe. Then like on all this, okay, this checks out in terms of this schizoid typology. And then I realized, like reason why I'm hesitant around talking to people, interacting with people, is because of some of these experiences with cluster Bs. So that was kind of my thoughts on a lot of that. But as time went on, I started to realize, okay, there's a lot of people out there who are just normal people, and then I still, from a feelings perspective, I was still holding on to his anxieties, things like not wanting to give out too much information, vulnerability. So from that perspective, it's kind of like a clash, I guess, of two kind of sides. And depending on how I was feeling that day, I may or may not, lean into it or push against it. And so that's really, I guess, most of it.
Mm-hmm. So you're pointing out to this, I guess it's a kind of, I don't want to over dramatize it, but let's say kind of part of the fundamental experience of someone with schizoid personality, that kind of paranoia and not feeling safe around other people. And for you, it manifested that as kind of seeing all this cluster Bs around you a little bit and diagnosing people. And that was something that kept you a little bit more safe.
It is, but I mean, it's niche, right? So I've gone through entire work. No, I've gone through a lot of interactions, across various different spaces, and everything just kind of works just fine. Everyone's all right. It's just more along the lines of, okay, something's wrong here, and then I start saying, okay, this person that's a flag. Now I'm kind of paying more attention and things like that, and that kind of makes, it used to make me more nervous. This particular day, I'm kind of I like to think that I'm kind of over it, and I don't want to be in that world anymore. I don't want to interact with those people. There are so many nice, beautiful, friendly people. I am pushing myself to focus on those, instead of, as we know in psychology, you always kind of fixate on the negatives. And so it's very easy to be zoned in and like dissociative and paranoid, because you're somebody else is kind of I guess flashing in terms of your warning detector or whatever.
Right. And I suppose there is this bias that the more we focus on this particular kind of people, the more of them we're going to start seeing in our lives, I suppose. At least that's my experience sometimes. If I read about something and then oh yeah, this is everyone's around me that way kind of thing.
It is, but in it, we'll go into that a little bit more, but it's more along the lines of even on YouTube feed. It always hits you with it over and over and over again because that gets clicks, right? So you can focus on these things and live in that world all the time. But I'm like, nope, guys, don't care. I'm gonna do something else because I realize I feel manipulated in some regards. So I'm gonna push and turn the wheel the other way, just kind of spite this. And if maybe that's a schizoid thing to do because you don't really trust society and the institutions of modernity. So I try my best to just go headlong in the opposite or positive direction, even if I am actually making progress or not isn't really the idea. It's just having that pointer in that certain direction, not being goal oriented. I have to do this, this, and this time. It's just enjoying the striving and just being I'm putting this way, even if I'm not 100%, just say 70% of my effort into this positive direction. Over time, that makes me feel better and things seem to get better in my life.
Yeah. So purposely focusing on more positive things rather than sinking into this negativity. And before you said something about I guess that's part of this process, but focusing more on positive people, let's say, or good kind of people, rather than this other realm. How do you do that?
So let's say I'm talking to somebody, and people, they kind of bore me, you might say, just we don't jive. I don't want to be too judgmental about that, but we don't jive. But sometimes I get really good conversations out of people. I really kind of enjoy that. If there's an engaging, good conversation, or this person, I can tell from their micro expressions are generally happy to see me and things like that. I try to focus on that. Like, for example, the intonation of their voice and like they're happy to see me. I'm like, in my head, from like the schizoid perspective, like they're faking it, or like it's not sincere, or it doesn't matter, they don't actually know me. All of these kind of like sides, I try to ignore that, and from a feeling perspective, I try to let the feelings that they're exuding in terms of energy in, talking to them, engaging kind of normally, just as I normally do. If it's something I'm genuinely interested in, usually that comes across well. And thankfully, I have different things I'm kind of researching and always doing all the time in my spare time in terms of just reading and things like that. So it becomes easy to have conversations because I'm kind of building my own identity in a lot of these different ways, reading different subjects, maybe not actually engaging the hobbies, but at least I can have a conversation. So when I'm interacting and from a positive perspective, I kind of pay attention to that. And I just kind of talk normally, naturally. And I used to think like I'm not really being authentic, right? This is more of a persona, and that's why this isn't a positive interaction. It's all like if they really knew me, they wouldn't want anything to do with me in some regards. That's as time goes on, I kind of think that's kind of the negative way of seeing it. Like I like to think of it, more like I'm all over the place, right? In terms of like different things I can do, who I want to be, and that's kind of endearing if you look at it in that positive aspect. So yes, while it is fragmented in some regards, it's kind of interesting, like being the guy who's kind of quiet and thinks a lot and it has kind of short sentences, then goes up and does like sings karaoke and he's like everyone's like whoa, where's this coming from, and things like that. And so there are different aspects of yourself that you can kind of make things interesting, and people will be engaged and want to know you more. And these are not really parts of yourself that are inauthentic, right? I think one thing that bothered me a lot from a psychological perspective was like the person you really are is the person you are when you're alone. I think that sentence isn't really applicable to people who are neurodivergent. So I try to think like, okay, you can look at it this way, but think about it this way. Like you're not really, you're playing the same game as everybody else. I'm still human and things like that and blah, blah, blah. But it's more like you got some things that are a little bit, jagged just because of, upbringing and environment and things like that. So if you kind of get rid of that label and just be like, I'm going to be spontaneous and just like do as I feel. And if you can even tell people that and they'll accept it. Like, for example, you say like, I'm like, normally I'm not like, I'm actually a very quiet kind of, pensive guy, but I try to do my best when I'm out, when I'm in amongst people, put my best foot forward. So if you ever see, and then you can make a joke out of it. I haven't done it before. If you ever see me like, like just drop and get really quiet all of a sudden, don't be surprised. And that actually did happen. And I was with some people I was hanging out with. Eventually, I was hungry. We'd been tired from the day. I was just, I couldn't talk anymore. And I found myself kind of looking in the distance, disassociating, thinking about this, ruminating thoughts, and etc. And then everyone was like, whoa, I see there's a huge difference in like the way you're talking. And then I kind of like brought that up. So how do you guys like usually feel when you're feeling like off? Do you get angry, things like that? So I tried to have this conversation that was away from me, that other people can talk about that while I was just trying to process and doing into that. And then eventually, as the day went on, I was able to get like a little bit more energy, be aside from the group a little bit. And then I came back and I was able to talk more. Was I exhausted after the entire reaction when I came home? Did I have to stare into space and kind of come back to level? Yeah, but that's kind of the game. It's not really a bad thing. As long as you're like, throwing those darts at the wall, so to speak, that's the most important thing. You can't just focus on the negatives of it, of, I can't connect. I always seem to dissociate. All these things are wrong with me. It's very easy to get into that headspace. And so I am with spite almost, I kind of throw myself into these situations. And I've noticed that with some of the other people who are on the schizoid spectrum, they kind of just they take a deep breath and they run towards these situations because they know it's good for them. And so I do the same thing.
So it sounds like you do recognize like the kind of some sort of fragmentation of yourself and different parts of you that sometimes might be a little bit in conflict or sometimes a little bit not very paired up, let's say. So sometimes you're very quiet, but sometimes you can be very spontaneous. And there is maybe sometimes this more paranoid perspective about people, more like suspicious, but then there's also that perspective that is more maybe like present moment oriented and trying to focus on what is good about the experience and what you're enjoying about the experience. But at the same time, although you do recognize all this like fragmentations and different parts of you and different maybe conflicts, you seem very accepting of all of that that is happening within you, like that's what you are, or that's who you are, kind of thing.
Well, I tried to be like, okay, I'm gonna coalesce and do things like that, but it's just too much, right? And I think even everybody has these different fragmentations too, right? If you get in someone's face, they're gonna get very angry and perhaps may trigger somebody. And there's a part of them that really comes out to defend them and things like that. So I try not to overthink it too much. But I mean, is my life that bad? If I was truly, this was like I was like losing my job. I was like burning bridges and then like having like interpersonal conflicts that were detrimental. I would have to say, okay, maybe this fragmentation is, too severe or something like that. And I never really feel like the negative aspects or like part of these fragmentations. Like if I was continually getting into negative interactions as a result of it, then I would have to make a change. But because I'm not, and it's kind of authentic, as we would say, or at least genuine, then I just kind of let it be and say, yeah, that's just kind of how it is.
So has it always been that way for you? Have you always had this approach to maybe these different parts of you, or
No, not at all. So I mean,
what
it's
changed?
yeah. So that's kind of the more of the issues, right? So like I used to think, I mean, this is kind of why, from a relationship perspective, I would push people away a lot because all that fear of intimacy. Because we'll say like who you really are, and then that person I really am is like you think about your family interactions. You think about this is how you get into that overthinking perspectives and things along those lines, and um, you kind of want to push people away. You feel engulfed and things like that. There were so many feelings and reasonings I did not understand at that time, and they were differently pulling the strings because I didn't know about this schizoid typology, and I wouldn't have been able to push past those points had I not had that knowledge of reading about what is like, what is this schizoid? How do they interact? How do they think in terms along those lines? As many people probably who are on the spectrum may know, you're kind of like self-obsessed almost in terms of like how much you want to learn about yourself. But then it's very easy to become like a black hole of just like constant, ruminations and things like that. But it's and then you can stay in that spot. But I'm trying to like use that as a way to push off and move forward. But to get to the exact point, in the past, I had a lot of anxiety. I had that very harsh super ego. So the parts of me that were the best parts of me were kind of so scattered by those feelings that I couldn't control that it was hopeless. Like you can't. It's like saying, I'm going to put you into a room with like a I don't know, tiger or bear, and like I'm going to be positive, and then I'm going to be whatever. It's like that, and then you just go through and like all that is thrown out the window. Feelings kind of it's like a bulldozer, and it's kind of pointless. So the ways that I was able to over time kind of chip away at that was realize learning about psychology, things like the ego, super ego, the id. And I kind of got into Carl Jung, a lot of the works that he had said. And then oddly enough, I was on the right path because, everybody else in the schizoid spectrum also likes him a lot. And so, okay. But as I went through, I learned about, like the unconscious. It has kind of gives you presence almost. And being able to, I was looking on YouTube as well, a lot of people who were then tell you like how to process your unconscious and talk to it. So what I would do, this is in tandem with therapy. I would, when I go to sleep, right at the cusp of when I'm about to fall asleep, that's when I would start talking to the aspects of myself, kind of ask them like, what's going on here? And kind of like, like why are you like torturing me like this in a certain regards? And I would talk to that and then listen to it, what would come back at me. I was talking to myself in this regards, but I felt during like that twilight of sleep, it got a lot of good work done. And then I would notice when I would go to sleep, it'd only be what had washed away like dreams. Doing that kind of heavy lifting in terms of like introspection during the day would leave me cranky. It would leave me anxious. It was terrible.
Yeah.
So I stopped that real quick. I don't know how other people can do that. That's them. But for myself, it was always right before I went to sleep. And I had to attack the things that weren't necessarily the obvious things. You have to attack the feelings that you're getting, because it's all deep and rooted in your unconscious from your experiences. And I knew, even though there wasn't that much data on some other parts, like specifically schizoid aspects, there's plenty about things like complex trauma, etc., that I could still draw from and kind of understand, and other people who've done their own self work. So thankfully, there was a lot of data on the internet I could use, as well as from works like Carl Jung that gave me targets to kind of shoot at, so to speak.
Hmm. Okay. So you've been having this dialogues with these different parts of you. So am I understanding it right, that what changed for you is that in the past, all these different parts of you were kind of running wild a little bit, so out of control, right? And then over time, it's not like you healed this fragmentation, like like everything became one. Like there's still different parts of you, but they're like more, like you own them more. Like you're more conscious. Like they're not out of control, but they're part of you. Is that how? Am I describing it right?
You are, but there's one thing to add to that. What you said is I had to trim the fat in a lot of it. Things like my anxieties, that integrating the shadow, as they may say, that was a big part of it, because you'd have like I used to like kind of, because depression is like basically bring all your anger inward, and that's why you get the anxious anxiety, the fantasies of vengeance, things like that. And so that's I had those parts of me, and I introspected it. I had to basically integrate that shadow, and then one of the things I started doing, which was actually a really good idea, was like going into the gym a lot, and I was kind of burning those feelings off and things like that at that point. That's before I had more discipline in that regards. So just kind of taking those feelings that I had and then trying to use them in a way that was constructive. Basically what I had read, and so I kind of pushed in that regards. That took a while. This is not like something like just like in an instant. This was over. I talked about this with my therapist as well, and she was like, "Yeah, like it seems you're going really deep here." And so she kind of said, like, "Yeah, keep doing what you're doing." Let's see other things that I did. That was like the biggest thing that because I think a lot of this comes back to how I was raised, and society thinks anger is bad. I had to realize that it really isn't. It's anger used judiciously, and anger used in a constructive manner is important. If anything, it keeps you from being a coward in a lot of regards, right? Because you can't just be like, I'm gonna punch this guy who disrespected me, because that's the right thing to do. Like you have to have that anger to really connect your fist to this guy's face. Okay. So it's what I'm trying to say. Like that negative emotion has a place, but it has to be controlled. And as we probably know from the Carl Jung said, integrating the shadow. This is nothing new or novel that I'm saying. It's simply how I applied it, given my own psychological typology.
Okay. So this kind of interactions and dialogues with these different parts of you, I guess they were bringing up different feelings for you, different emotions, different feelings that you had to process, had to experience and process and go through them, kind of thing.
Yeah. Because it was impacting in my like even my work life and things like that. I would be on presentations and things like that. I would seize up. I would like start stuttering over my words, speaking way too fast. Everyone would always say like, you're such a fast talker, and like I think that was just me, my anxiety just kind of ramping
Right.
up
Yeah.
my my speech. So that's why I had to do that, and amongst other things in my life too. There's a lot of things that was very it was like 4 years ago, things like that, 3 years ago.
Mhm.
Things were much more in flux, and so while it was uncomfortable, while it um, wasn't fun, at least the positive stat was like, at least I'm doing something that I feel had value. I was doing something that it was kind of like a segmented personal journey that I had aside from the things like getting a job, meeting friends, things like that, food, yada yada. I had this other aspect of myself that was constantly challenging. So in that part, it was kind of exciting and almost dramatic because it was like finally I'm no longer at the mercy of like these negative thoughts, or being like looking at uh, feeling inadequate, feeling uh, damaged in some regards. I finally had something I could do that could fix those things, and so that was almost a relief. Like it's a terrible feeling. You don't know what's going wrong with you, and you're just swinging in the dark. And so I'm glad that um, I had positive things to focus on and kind of throw myself into that. One part I'd like to mention, I know people talk about that. How do you get past the lack of motivation and anhedonia to even get started, right? And I think you really have to be in that breakdown state where you have to be, and that can be from, I'm not going to advocate for it necessarily, but psychedelics would be one way. Traumatic interactions, like if you get your heart broken or something along those lines, or something traumatic happens to you, you can take that energy and you kind of throw it into something. I know that, but I've talked, people who were on the schizoid spectrum, like they always have those manic kind of hypomanic bursts. I know what that definitely feels like. And so when you have that wind, put it into your sails. You gotta throw that into things, and don't think like I'm out of control or manic or crazy. You probably are, really, but that's energy, and if that energy propels you and gets that fire started, then that's a good thing, because being in as uncomfortable and as unfun as it is to be emotionally dysregulated, it's preferable to being dissociated.
Mhm. What about in terms of these people who their life is like stagnant and they have nothing going on and they're comfortable enough, like they don't have to worry about things. There's no major crisis. Very often, this kind of people can experience like anhedonia or low motivation. How could they induce this, you know, I guess, form of crisis?
Yeah, that's a good question. So yeah, let's say you're getting your job, you're going through the daily things like that, but it's kind of like a lot of gray, right?
Yeah.
I think that you have to put a target. What is your target? What's something you can focus on that you'd like to change? And as cliche it's been said 1,000 times, like you have to want to change. And so, what are the aspects that you like to have? One good one would be like, um, do you want to have a better professional life? Did you want to have a let's see? But then again, when I say this, like that want is never there in the first place. So how do you get that want?
Yeah.
One way would be like there's that, for example, cold showers, right? People say that it's kind of a new thing that everybody's doing. That's one thing I definitely did, and I've fallen off recently, but I might get back into it. But that was one thing that I started doing. Like I defy you to not feel emotional when you're having blasted with cold water on you. And so you used to think like, oh, everything else doesn't matter. It's me and this task. And that's all that matters. And then once you get that feeling of it, like, and you feel almost like grandiose or whatever like that, run with that feeling. And then
Mm.
like, I'm going to like, clean my deck. And now I'm going to do this like that. And even eventually it's going to burn out because it was just a dopamine, epinephrine boost. So, but that shows you that it's possible. And if you keep doing that over and over again, and that raises that dopamine level and things like that. And there's also like you're seeing a positive effects, right? And so, oh, this is possible. It's even the smaller things, and then maybe continuing doing that over and over again, maybe some of it will stick. Again, it's hard for me to speak to people who are lower functioning because I don't know what they've been through. I don't know whether what it's like to be in it. Like they're playing the big leagues. I was in the minor leagues the whole time. That's the way I think about it. So I can only say it from my own perspective, not as a, I don't, I, my heart goes out to them in terms of what they're feeling and what they're going through.
Yeah.
But it's I can only say that, yeah, just even the small increments, small things, don't think about it in the bigger picture and get lost in that thoughts. Like there is value in doing the smaller things. I know, like, and you got people in that community or that I've noticed they're very positive and supportive. So you got people who can help
Yeah.
you out, and so just keep at it. I don't know.
So what you just described, I guess, the first part, apart from the support of the community and other people with the schizoid personality, what you are describing is almost as if there's a value of purposely making yourself somewhat uncomfortable, whether it's a cold shower, whether it's going to the gym, whether it's something that will get you, I guess, desperate enough to go after the goal or the change that you want to make in your life. So then you have the energy, then you get that energy that will motivate you to make these changes. So it's not like, sitting in your room and contemplating the change and maybe figuring things out in your head. I mean, there is a value in that as well, I'm sure. But to actually go and do something, there's this part of getting yourself maybe a little bit uncomfortable or stressed out even, making this,
Yes,
putting yourself in this kind of situations.
an analogy I use a lot is like you're playing a game of billiards, right? Configure all the angles, learn all the theory, have the nice, nice thrown stick, but until you start putting in shots that are, clear and you can do, it's all for nothing. So you gotta, and I feel when I say this out loud, it all feels so like hokey pokey, but from a specifically a schizoid perspective, what can get you past that anhedonia and lack of motivation is, I think you have to somehow find a way to access that like inner manic energy. And I know it's something I've seen a lot in different people. There's every so often something explodes, right? And instead of looking at this, I'm out of control, right? I've lost control and things like that, and wanting to go back into your dissociated state. You guys like, now is my chance, and then use that. So that's the best advice I can give. And I think there's other people in this world and psychologists who probably talk about these things more than I can. But that was one thing that I think really helped me a lot and get me to this point and me break through that malaise of the schizoid
Yeah, yeah.
like
So
life.
getting manic, getting obsessive about things and just rolling with it basically.
Yeah.
And it's a good, yeah.
And instead of doing that and something like I'm gonna be fixated on like a hobby or something like that, which is the bad sign of being manic, right? You can like when you start going hobby from hobby to hobby. No, don't do that. Just focus on one thing and just and shoot that target until it's evaporated.
Right, right. Because it's all energy, right? So like I guess with this energy you can just jump from hobby to hobby and different interests and you know keep yourself maybe in this feedback loop of learning, especially learning more about yourself. Like you said before, it's a big thing for people with schizoid personality is this black hole of like, what is wrong with me? Who am I? And it's just, and that's
Yeah.
how I guess you can spend this energy. But I guess you can also spend it on more productive things and making changes in your life and improving yourself in areas that maybe you want to improve. So looking,
Yeah. I mean,
Mhm. Go on.
go ahead. I was gonna say like there was a time where I was using that energy to like play. I played StarCraft for like I don't know how many years, and I just kind of focused all my energy on that, and I learned the minutia of the whole game, and I got to the higher ranks. That was energy that I had and I was using, but I don't really look upon that as things that were valuable, at least to me. And so it was just kind of a way to use that energy dump. And so you can focus it more on something you want as opposed to something that you just enjoy, then it's better to do.
Yeah. Because it could be a form of practice also. Like, how to use this energy. So you maybe realize that you do have this kind of energy and focus, and then you learn how to apply it to other areas as well.
Yeah, I would totally agree.
Yeah. So look, if we kind of maybe change focus, I'm curious about looking forward. What are your maybe current challenges that you're facing or current goals? And what is your kind of vision for the next years when it comes to the maybe schizoid personality or your whole psychology at this point?
Sure.
I guess you're more than just a person with
Present day. What am I looking at present day? So currently, I'm still doing a lot of things that are kind of, you might say, zoidy in some regards, right? I have a remote job, and I live alone. There's the comforts and things like that. I can interact on my own time. So that's been set. But I do have to kind of, while I am talking to people and letting them in, there's different degrees to that. And so my level of openness, I'm trying to, I guess, in terms of vulnerability, even to people like, I don't say strangers, but even people I know, maybe just not a little bit on acquaintance. Once I get to that acquaintance level, maybe I can start talking about things. And sometimes I find a lot of difficulties in terms of that interpersonal relation, because it's like, I really tell you all this stuff about, my life and the things I've seen and do. Like, people will say, okay, that's terrible and things like that. But I feel like that it's not really hitting them. It's not really connecting in the same way as people who are, I guess, psychologically knowledgeable and things like that. So that's interpersonal relationship. I'm still difficult with that. And from a, in terms of finding a partner or relationships, that's something I have difficulties with, and I have to figure out how do I throw myself out there in that regards, and then how do I explain myself, and how do I, um, what kind of person would that be, and I'm trying to, at this point I'm trying to like put in a small net and not think about the generalities of it. So I'm going to do like constant things like groups and meetups and do that constantly and always be the person who's always there. And then as a result, people will get to know me. I'll have interactions, and then eventually maybe things would happen. I don't know if that's too much of a passive way to look at it. I don't know if I should just like we're talking about now, take that energy and just kind of throw myself into, I don't know, online dating and things like that. Like, and then that's part of the things that I'm pushing against now. So I guess the next level, of interpersonal, the highest level of interpersonal relations are actually on relationships. So I think that getting to that level is difficult for me. And then as I talked about before, things like anxieties, I feel those anxieties coming through, and then I have to realize, okay, we know what's going on. There's things I can do to mitigate it, and I just gotta keep trying, because what else am I gonna do with my time, my life?
Yeah.
You know?
So relationships and different, I guess, levels of intimacy, it's something that you're experimenting with and learning about right now in your life, and it's your major focus.
Exactly. What is vulnerability? What is oversharing? When is it the right time? When is it? Will people be like, what's wrong with this guy, or will they be like, oh, that's so great? Because I feel like everybody in this whole world is now, especially, are like, I have to speak my truth, and I have to talk about this, and this, and it's kind of exhausting, and I don't want my personal life be lost into the collective like that. That's something too, from a schizoid perspective, that bothers me a lot. I've always been against dissolving myself into a collective. That's fear of engulfment, I think, like that. So I'm in a spot, and like everybody, it's like a terrible feeling is like, how you have that, what's that one song, Every Breath You Take by the Police, and like people would used to have like
So
wedding dances. That song,
This is very cringy
right?
song.
Exactly. Everybody is just like ha 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 ha, ha. And then like it's a totally a song that totally lost the plot. That I feel like that kind of inner feeling. I get that even with other things too. And I don't know what to do with that. I think maybe that's just maybe I'm seeing things. I have abstract thoughts that other people aren't seeing. That's the positive way of looking at it. I don't know. Still figuring that part out. And I guess I can find that interesting or not really fun, but that's what I'm working on now.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, definitely there are some aspects in our society that are unhealthy. So I guess it's sometimes maybe hard to say how much it's like my own disordered way of thinking, let's say, or anxiety, and how much is actually the society that is kind of wonky.
Oh yeah, I mean, yeah, it's a weird time out there, and
Yeah.
so and I can only say, yeah, but you can, to spin that positively. That's where you find the communities, even the small ones. It doesn't have to be like 50 people. It can be just 10 people who kind of get you, and like that's you can actually build things and you can start to delegate and things like that. Like I know I could never be somebody who could do sales or something like that. So I would like there are other people out there with different personality structures that can all kind of jive with maybe that's the dream. I don't know if it's something I can really apply, but at least theoretically it's possible. So I try to focus on the community. There's a lot of good, and if only for my sanity, that's how I kind of do.
Yeah.
It's been better here since I used to live in a bigger city. People were more isolated. I've since moved to a spot that's like more sunny. It's definitely a different spot and different mentality of people. So you can even that might be a possibility. Like maybe you try different spot, different parts that may speak to you more. Like how many good things can you check off? Like I've moved someplace where it's warm. Check. Sunny. Check. Fresh air. These are all positives. So if it's possible, maybe that could be one result. But I definitely all I can say is that my moving from where I was at, and people who I used to associate with and talk to a lot, it's been a lot of benefits in the current present time.
So obviously the location and where you live, it's important to, let's say, that the health of your community or the part of the society that you live in. Yeah, so that's something to think about too.
Yeah, exactly. It is possible. Like I used to think like that's such a self-absorbed, way of saying it. Like it's everybody else, it's not me. Like there's no like that. When I say that out loud, that sounds like so incorrect. But sometimes, it may not be a good fit, right? So you can find a spot that may be a better fit. I know that's for some people who are, more. You can't even get to that point, but you can lean into other people, like people who are. It's very easy to go into like everything that's wrong and like get fixated on that. But try to look like what is the well-adjusted person like? How do they react? How do they talk? And then see like how could I get to a semblance of that in my own life? And so there are good people out there, and you can really like it's okay to be not engulfed, but like interact and let yourself kind of intermingle in some regards, like in terms of your personalities and just interactions. If they're a good person, that's not a bad thing. If that person is well adjusted and is at least kind.
Yeah. Okay. So as a last question, I'm curious about your perspective on just one more thing. Will you ever consider yourself to recover from schizoid personality disorder? Will you ever feel like, all right, I'm no longer having this kind of personality disorder?
No, I think that's impossible. I think that to be totally like it's again there's that argument of like is it really a disorder or is it just a personality? I'm in that camp. Like this is just my personality, and it's a personality that unfortunately is only really possible through trauma. But that, and I hate the way it sounds, but it can be, it's unique in that regards, that it's kind of more rare, or like more uncommon, because there's a lot of different things that have to happen to get to this where I'm at now. But that fragmentation, it makes you unique, right? And there's plenty of people in this world. Why would you want to be just like them in some regards? That's where the misanthropy may come into. Why do you want to be like the people who you secretly don't really like that much in a lot of regards? And so that's the way I think about it. Like, I try to be more grandiose. It's like, no, this is who I am. This is how it is. If I'm functioning, I'm doing the things I need to do, and that's what matters. There's always been the guy who was the kind of, the, not that, it's the worst word for it, but person, yeah, who's more monk-like, things like that. That's been a thing in art history. So I think that's just your role. This is how it is, and then yeah, you wouldn't even want to be totally normal. Trust me, because there are people who are normal who wish they were more weird. I promise you. Like, so accept it and try to make it so you're not in pain all the time. That's really the thing we're trying to do here. Like, get rid of the pain, get rid of the trauma, get rid of the malignancy of it, and everything else, just enjoy it in some regards. So there are parts, they're unique and I think enjoyable about being in the schizoid spectrum.
Yeah. So. Well, thank you so much, Lazar, for sharing all your experiences and thoughts with us today. Is there anything important that you would like to add? Anything that maybe you wanted to add before, or wouldn't have time?
Just one last thing is, like, I don't have any social media. I don't have anything like that. I'm just some guy who just wanted, to do his part. So if people want to be like, oh, can I talk to you more and ask more questions? I don't know if maybe, I don't know if I'm at that point. Just, yeah, thank you for everything you do, and for the people who are on the same spectrum, on the schizoid spectrum, just keep pushing at it, man. Just, even you're not alone. It's, you got people, even if you can't find your own community, at least know that you got in your community of who are in the schizoid spectrum to help you. So you'll always have that. Well, thank you again for sharing all your thoughts with us. Thanks, Joanna.